We got a question from one of our listeners asking, what are the marks of a person that is truly born again?
Yeah.
It's a question it's a question a lot of people have, I think.
Right. It's really about transformation, isn't it? Like, what does it really mean to go through this kind of rebirth?
Yeah, exactly. Like, how do you even know?
Uh-huh. And what's really interesting is we can actually look to some early observations about this very thing.
Oh,
Yeah, there were folks who observed these people whose lives had been totally changed.
okay.
And they noticed some patterns, some consistent markers, let's say, that showed this change was real.
So there were like signs, you mean?
Exactly. Signs of true transformation.
Yeah.
And I think that can give us a really helpful way to think about this whole born again idea.
I like that. Signs. So what's the first sign then?
Well, the first one is turning to God.
Okay, turning to God. So that seems pretty straightforward, right?
Well, it's more than just saying, okay, I believe in God now.
Gotcha.
It's about a total shift in how we relate to God. Think about it like this. You go from seeing God as this distant figure, maybe even kind of scary like a judge,
Oh, yeah.
to suddenly understanding him as a loving father.
Okay, that's a big difference.
Huge. It's like, finally coming home, finally feeling safe and accepted, like you found this refuge.
And I bet that changes everything, right? Like how you act, what you do.
Everything. And it makes me think about, like, how differently you act around someone you're afraid of versus someone who loves you?
Totally. Like if you think someone's out to get you, you're going to be super cautious, maybe even avoid them altogether.
Right. But if you know they're on your side, you can relax, you can be yourself.
So turning to God is like changing that whole feeling, that whole picture you have in your mind about him.
Exactly. You see him as this source of strength and love, not as something to be scared of. And that brings us to the second sign, which kind of flows right out of this first one.
Okay, what's that?
Turning from idols.
Idols? Wait, like statues and stuff?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, those can be idols, but it's broader than that.
Okay.
Idols are anything that takes God's place in our lives. It could be money, success, even good deeds, if those become the things that we rely on for our sense of worth or our security.
So it's like we're putting our trust in the wrong things.
Yeah, in things that can't actually give us what we're truly looking for. And what's tricky is that these idols, they can be super sneaky.
Like how?
Well, think about it. We might not even realize that we're holding on to these things that are holding us back from God.
Okay, I'm starting to see it. I mean, like...
Right. And that's what leads us to the third sign.
Okay, lay it on me.
Serving the living God.
So this is where, like, the belief actually becomes action, right?
Yes. It's about how we live our lives. If we're truly born again, it's not just going to be this internal thing. It's going to affect everything we do.
So are we talking like, big dramatic things like selling all your possessions and going to be a missionary?
It could be that, but it's also the everyday stuff. It's how we treat people, how we do our jobs, even the little things. Like there's this story about a shopkeeper, right? And after he had this experience of being born again, he became known for being super honest. Like, he made sure his scales were accurate. He wasn't cheating anyone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and people were like, wow, this guy's different. But it wasn't like he was doing anything super flashy. It was just, he was just living with integrity,
Yeah, that makes sense. It's about, like, letting that change inside you really affect how you act in the world.
Exactly. And it all goes back to those idols, right? If we've turned away from them, then we can actually start serving God in a real way.
Okay, so that's 3. What's the last one?
The last sign is waiting for God's Son from heaven.
Waiting for God's Son from heaven. What does that mean, practically speaking?
It's about where we're putting our hope.
Okay.
Like, if we're truly born again, we're not going to be so caught up in the things of this world, all the worries and ambitions.
Right.
Instead, we're going to be focused on that future with Jesus, on that promise of heaven.
So it's kind of like living with eternity in mind.
Yes, and letting that shape how we live today. Our choices, our priorities.
Wow. So to recap, we've got turning to God, turning from idols, serving the living God, and waiting for God's Son from heaven.
Those are the 4 signs, yeah.
And these signs, they're not just like a checklist or something, right?
No. Okay.
They're more like guides, I guess.
Yeah, I like that. They help us see what this transformation can really look like, in our own lives and in the lives of others.
It makes you think, like, which of those signs is the strongest in my own life? And which ones maybe need a little work?
Yeah, it's definitely something to think about. And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about that ongoing process of change. That's what being born again is all about.
Man, this has been a really good conversation. Thank you so much for explaining all of this.
It's been my pleasure. It's a topic that I think we could talk about forever, really.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Anytime.